England has always been a place of wonder for me. My father has told me stories about England with the times that he has visited there. I too have visited on business, but never really on vacation until July of last year. My wife and I decided to go there. The places we wanted to pick was more than London. We wanted to pick places based on history, music, art, architecture, and literature. As a result, we picked the following places to go to: London, Liverpool, Winchester, Bath, Arundel, and Dover. London is a vast city. One could spend years there and still not see everything. Given that we had 3 days, I chose a hotel near Trafalgar Square, which was close to the heritage sites we wanted to see. London's Heathrow Airport is a considerable way from London Centre, which is around where the Trafalgar Square is. Taxis were not an option for me. It's exorbitant, in my opinion. The buses would just take too long. The sub, which is the London Tube, was pretty reasonably priced, but would also take considerable time. I opted for to go with the London Heathrow Express train system, which gets from London Heathrow to London Paddington at about 26 minutes. Now, here's the key with London Heathrow Express. You could buy the tickets at the airport, and it's quite expensive. On the other hand, if you plan ahead and get the ticket in advance online, it's considerably cheaper. You could probably get it like half or a third of the price of what you would have to pay if you were to buy the ticket at the airport. We stayed at the Grand Hotel near Trafalgar Square. It is called Club Quarters these days. Trafalgar Square has had personal significance for me and also is of historical significance. From the personal part, when my father came back from visiting London, he had been to Trafalgar Square where he had some photos taken of him feeding pigeons. These were black and white photos, beautiful photos, and they were embedded in my mind, and therefore it was a go to place for me, Trafalgar Square. From a historical side, Trafalgar Square is commemorating the war that the British Navy fought and beat the French and the Spanish navies in the Napoleonic Wars of the 1800s. Admiral Nelson was leading the British Navy. He, in fact, died in the war. So there's a column that you will see behind me in one of the photos, and yes, with the statue of Admiral Nelson on top there. Facing the Trafalgar Square is also the National Gallery. It is a must see. It has a magnificent collection of portraits, which are more than life size, of various sceneries of the past, of kings, queens, the people, and so forth. So you could easily take 2 to 3 hours going through the gallery. The Tower of London is one of those historic palaces within England. It was established in the 11th century by William the Conqueror. As he conquered his way up north, he wanted to establish a stronghold in London. He built the Tower of London, which has been built and added to since then by the many kings and queens afterwards. An interesting fact is that the William the Conqueror, in a span of 21 years in the 11th century, built 36 castles, this being one of them, and this being the one he invested the most in, because he believed he needed to establish that stronghold in London. The tower has been occupied by either the king or the queen or the lord of the area. It's been also used to house criminals. You may have heard people from England sometimes say the term, I might be sent to the tower. Well, what that meant was they considered themselves possible criminals, and as criminals would be sent to the tower to be held in a cell until they were executed, perhaps. And yes, executions, beheadings took place in the tower, and I believe it carried on to the earliest of 20th century. It has been customary for the king or the queen before the coronation or before the wedding to spend the night there before they find their way to Westminster Abbey the next day for the coronation or the wedding. If you were to visit the Tower of London, I would strongly advise that you purchase the ticket online for the day of your visit before the visit. You could buy the ticket when you get to the tower, but you may find yourself behind a line of people extending an hour to 2 hours trying to get a ticket before you go in. Getting the ticket in advance allowed us to very quickly enter the tower through the west gate entrance. As you enter the tower through the west gate, to the left, you will see a place where there are tours being offered every 20 or 30 minutes by the tower guards. The tower guards is the gentleman in the back with the black and red uniform. I understand it's been this uniform for the tower guards for centuries. Some of the tower guards can be really funny. The one we had was humorous enough to give us a history and tell us some morbid stories about beheadings, but most importantly, took us around some of the main areas of the tower to explain what happened where and some of the significant areas to go further travel into when you are in the tower. I have learned after visiting many castles that the inner part of the castle is called the keep. This building is the White Tower, was otherwise known as the keep. This was the strongest point within the tower. It was meant to house the king or the queen and therefore needed all the protection it could get. There are tours being offered within the White Tower that you should consider taking. Up in the upper floors is the torture chamber, which I believe there are some implements of from the time of the beheadings that took place. Inside the White Tower, you could take a tour by yourself or go with a tour guide, and you'll be taken through bed chambers for the kings and the queens, the assistants, the kitchen, the place where the kings did their administration. There are rooms with weaponry there consisting of spears, knives, armor, swords, axes, armor for the horses and so forth. But the one I was particularly amused by was the last armor for King Henry VIII, where he took it upon himself to make sure that his virility was accentuated by leaving enough space for his crown jewels. And I'm not talking about the one that goes on his head. As you come out of the White Tower and walk around the building, you will find various equipment that were used in the war, like cannons and so forth, there. Also, separately, is a building where the crown jewels are kept, and you could take a tour inside. It's worth a visit. Surrounding the White Tower are a number of buildings, and one of them is a building in the back that you see with Tudor architecture. This is where the guests to the king stayed when they came to visit. Anne Boleyn, who was the queen number two for King Henry VIII, stayed there overnight before she went and got married to King Henry VIII. Now, if you know history, you will also know that it wasn't very much long after that King Henry VIII had Anne Boleyn executed in the Tower. As you exit the Tower of London, you will come to a walkway which is right alongside River Thames, overlooking the London Bridge. And as you come out further, you will find shops with restaurants and memorabilia. One of the surprising finds coming out of the Grand Hotel one afternoon was this bus tour. It's afternoon tea bus tour with Paddington the bear. We tried to get on it, but the seats were all taken. But it looked really very interesting. It's really meant more for families with little children. But hey, we are young adults at the same time. So we did want to get in, couldn't make it. My recommendation is if you wanted to try it, you should get the tickets in advance. One of the other English heritage sites we visited was the Westminster Abbey. Its start is unknown, but since 1066, it's been the site of coronation of 40 English and British monarchs, burial site of 18 British, Scottish, and English monarchs. And there's been at least 16 royal weddings there. And for those of us who can remember, Prince Charles and Princess Diana were wed at the altar in the Westminster Abbey, and I have pictures of that here. Coming out of the Westminster Abbey is a view of the Big Ben clock tower. Not too far from the Grand Hotel is the Sherlock Holmes pub. Having read Arthur Conan Doyle's stories about Sherlock Holmes growing up, it was fascinating for me to be able to see the pub there and be able to visit there. One of the opportunities I missed is that many of these heritage sites within England are called English heritage sites, and those who are visitors to England can buy a membership that allows you to then visit these heritage sites for free. So if you're visiting any more than two heritage sites, I believe you pick up the value of the tickets. And I must have visited five or six and I missed the opportunity. So here's the lead to go get the membership to the English Heritage site. It'll come in handy if you're going to do any travel around England and see more than two heritage sites. Our next stop after London was going to Liverpool. We took the train from London Euston Station to Liverpool. In the Avanti West Coast Express, there was a train change that we had to make in the middle. And of course, the reason for going to Liverpool is it's the home of the Beatles, and I will cover that in my next video. Be on the lookout for it.